'Cause all I wanna do is lie with you. Even though it's wrong, I'll lie with you.
When she was younger, she would pretend that her bedroom was a castle, she was fairest in the land. And she got older, and it all changed. There was no time for make-believe, and all the magic slipped away, until the light in her eyes, it was all but gone. 'Cause all the dreams that she had turned out to be wrong. So keep your head up, princess, for your crown falls. Know these voices in your head will be your downfall. I know it gets so hard, but you don't got far to go. Yeah, keep your head up, princess, it's a long road, and the path leads right to where they won't go. I know it hurts right now, but I know you'll make it home. So keep your head up. Yeah, keep your head up. Well, now she's grown up, works at a bar. She traded makeshift gowns for serving rounds from sunrise till it's dark. And all her friends got someone to hold. She's got no one there, still not prepared to make it on her own. And now the light in her eyes, it's now all but gone. 'Cause all the dreams that she had turned out to be wrong. So keep your head up, princess, for your crown falls. Know these voices in your head will be your downfall. I know it gets so hard, but you don't got far to go. Yeah, keep your head up, princess, it's a long road, and the path leads right to where they won't go. I know it hurts right now, but I know you'll make it home. So keep your head up. Yeah, keep your head up. One day you'll find your way back to the start. One day you'll live in your dreams. One day you'll wake up and girl, you'll be a queen. So keep your head up, princess, for your crown falls. Know these voices in your head will be your downfall. I know it gets so hard, but you don't got far to go. Yeah, keep your head up, princess, it's a long road, and the path leads right to where they won't go. I know it hurts right now, but I know you'll make it home. So keep your head up. Yeah, keep your head up.
You could give me chills on a summer day, yeah. When we're laying still, but you make my heart race. Gonna keep me young when we're old and gray. I know that time moves on, but some things don't change. I won't stop getting butterflies. I get them every time I look into your eyes. You won't stop running through my mind for the rest of both our lives. You give me butterflies, and I keep on getting butterflies.
I still fall in love with you every time I see your eyes. It takes me back to the first time I saw you smile. They told us we were young and dumb, we didn't know about love. Now look at all the things we've become. I won't stop getting butterflies. I
Ladies and gentlemen, can we ask you to take your seats as the next stand session is about to begin? Thank you.
Dress on you before, but every time I do, I swear it only makes me love you more. And I won't stop getting butterflies. I get them every time, yeah. I get them every time. I won't stop getting butterflies. I get them every time I look into your eyes. You won't stop running through my mind for the rest of both our lives. You give me butterflies. I keep on getting, keep on getting, I keep on getting butterflies. I keep on getting butterflies.
You called with the news, I thought you were kidding. You're always joking all the time. You kept breathing.
Ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for attending this session. My name's Jane Healey Brown. I'm a Director of Planning at Arup in Manchester, and really delighted to welcome you here today for this conversation around inclusive communities. So in this session, we're going to reflect on why inclusive communities are important, why they're important for our successful, productive and happy communities. And so this afternoon, we're going to hear firstly from Salford and their plans for creating inclusive communities through regeneration, and then from Belfast's great experience of promoting inclusive community building, and then finally from Homes England, from their experience about inclusive community building through their projects and programmes. And I'm personally really excited by this. As a Salfordian in the room, married to somebody from Belfast, these are fantastic projects that I'm really excited to hear about. But I'm going to start off by a little bit of scene setting around inclusive communities and what does this mean. And I'll start by sharing some insights from some of the global work that we've been doing at Arup around inclusive communities. So we've undertaken a number of research pieces, including looking at designing for ageing communities, creating child-friendly cities, queering public space. But most recently, we've worked with the United Nations and the University of Liverpool on a publication called Designing Cities for and with Women. And you'll see on the seat some cards with some details around that piece of research. Fantastically, it was launched at the UN General Assembly at the back end of last year, which has given huge prominence to the issue of gender equitable planning to transform our cities. But why are inclusive communities important? I think it's really important to think that if we don't respect diversity and inclusion, we will have less productivity, more sick people, weaker economic growth. So it's in everybody's interest to be developing much more inclusive cities. So why do we have these issues? Well, I think it's recognised that most of our cities and spaces have been created by predominantly a single homogenous group. Historically, less so now, but historically white, middle class, middle-aged men. And this narrow historic design of place can unintentionally, and maybe sometimes intentionally, exclude other groups. And that means these other groups are less able to feel safe and make the full use of these places, less able to access jobs and services, and less able to live a healthy and productive lifestyle. So what can we do? We'll hear about some of the thoughts from the case studies in a moment, but engagement is always going to be key. But even with the best of intentions, engagement can never fully consider all the aspects of diversity and inclusion. So what else can we do? Well, the United Nations work showed that we can bring inclusion into a project lifestyle. There's a toolkit in there around equality impact considerations, equality impact assessments. And this then helps encourage us being proactive in project design in terms of building inclusion in. But allyship is also important. We will never have the full range of our diverse communities engaged in our projects, but each one of us can be mindful of the needs of other communities and trying to champion the voices of those that are not often heard in the work that we do. And then finally, I think the culture of our organisations needs to be really considered. The organisations that we work for, if they aren't inclusive in the way that they operate, how can we expect the projects that we work to be inclusive as well? So it starts with us as individuals and within our organisations and allows us to play out with our projects. So I will conclude there, and I'm delighted to hand over to Tom Stannard, Chief Executive of Salford City Council, to talk to us about some of the great work that Salford is doing at the moment in developing some great inclusive communities. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Jane. Great to be here this afternoon. Great to see many of you here interested in talking about fair and inclusive cities, which is one of our cornerstone themes for Greater Manchester at MIPIM this year. We talked about that at our launch party last night. We talked about it in our preambles to the session this morning. That sense of economic growth, but inclusive economic growth, is one of our key mantras. It's a pleasure to be here with other colleagues on the panel, particularly with Jane. I have obviously far more allegiance with her allegiances to Salford than I do with her spouse, but I make that point in the spirit of partnership with Belfast and John, who we'll hear from in a minute. Inclusive growth is massively important to many of us. Many of us have made it a bit of a life's mission, really, in all of our work in and around economic development and the built environment. And it's been good as well to see many initiatives about broadening the representation within our profession and seeing an increasingly diverse, younger, less male, less white audience at MIPIM this year, I have to say, and more of that anon, I'm sure, and in the questions. This is at the heart of our vision in Salford. You'll see that on the slide there, which is a fairer and more inclusive economy that delivers social and environmental justice and more besides. But I think there's an important message within all of this, that apart from the fact that inclusive economic growth delivers many economic benefits, many health benefits, many productivity benefits, I think as you touched on in your preambles, Jane, it delivers a happier society and happier people. And happier people are more willing, more capable, more able to contribute economically and to get that motivation to do what I think is one of the key drivers of inclusive economies, which is to participate in ongoing learning and skills throughout their life courses. And that has to be at the heart, I think, of how we design and deliver the built environment and how we deliver sustainable ESG contributions from all those initiatives that we have at our disposal in Greater Manchester. Salford's growth, I think, is well known. We are the fastest growing economy within Greater Manchester. Our population and economic growth is on a par with some of the highest growth areas of inner London these days. Our census data, which I'll show you in just a second, is testimony to that. But in the last 5 years, you can see there from our GVA statistics, the expansion of our residential offer and our commercial floor space. We are increasingly seen as part of Manchester city centre. What used to be the old historic core of Salford and what is the city centre of Manchester have effectively bled into one. And it's partly why we come to MIPIM as Greater Manchester. It's partly why we exhibit as Manchester, because investors look at us very much through that city regional lens as Greater Manchester. And I think the expansion of that fast, rapid-paced economic growth is a big opportunity for the inclusion agenda. By 2040, we're expecting to expand to over 300,000 residents, and that's from 240,000 or thereabouts at the census before last. So that rate of growth, I think, speaks for itself. But with that comes, yes, pressures on our infrastructure, our school system, our healthcare system, but also a massive expansion in employment opportunity. And that's not just employment opportunity for young people coming into the labour market for the first time. It's people coming back into the labour market after the pandemic, and it's increasingly for people retraining and reskilling later in their lives and later in their careers. So I think that sense that one of our councillors, Bill Hines, who's a former council leader and still in our cabinet, often calls the tale of two cities, is very much in evidence in Salford. We have some of the highest levels of socioeconomic deprivation, not just in Greater Manchester, but in the country. We're still, unfortunately, the 18th most deprived authority of 350 or so in the land. But I think we are trying to recast that as an opportunity for an inclusive economic agenda and to work particularly hard on those construction-related, built environment-related, but particularly the education and skills opportunities that presents itself with. Many of our objectives and signature schemes you can see on the slide here. I won't describe these in enormous detail, but I do want to just dwell on 2 or 3 of them in a second, but particularly that sense of Salford representing 2 of the 6 big growth locations within Greater Manchester, both the city centre and also Port Salford and the Western Gateway, which we share with Trafford and increasingly with Liverpool City region as well. Big parts of that sense of a region that is very much on the up with those opportunities to sell in to our local communities. Some of our signature schemes, Salford Crescent, which is the innovation, research and development district that we are developing in and around Salford University, in a joint venture with the English Cities Fund, something that's been delivering the goods over a number of years now and moving on to the next level, supported by levelling up funding in relation to the Salford Rise scheme, and very much a scheme that is focused on not just R&D and digital in their own right, but increasingly on innovation in and around those built environment curriculum specialisms that Salford University has been known for in the north of England for many years. And that Crescent Master Plan is a real opportunity for gearing that skills pipeline in and around the university, which will be home to GM's first Institute of Technology, which opens later this year. Media City as well, home to the BBC, but very much moving on to the next level in terms of its known and established specialisms around media and production, but increasingly very much moving into the artificial intelligence and gaming space, and again will be very much part of our GM strategy for innovation, as well as an infamous backdrop that many of you I'm sure are glued to on your breakfast TV most mornings of the week. We're also launching a very strong focus around culture and city region festivals in and around Media City, and although unfortunately, because of the death of the monarch, who could have predicted such a thing, we couldn't run our We Invented the Weekend festival, which we were planning to do on that very weekend that all occurred last September. That will be coming back to Media City as one of our signature annual events, and very much making use of Media City not just as an employment and growth zone, but as a place for people and a place for celebration, culture, inclusion and family activities. And we also have a major agenda with our town centres, and the council's taking a very big and active role in relation to this. We've recently taken the gamble ahead of whether or not we got money from the Levelling Up Fund to acquire the shopping centre in Eccles and the redevelopment and master planning of Eccles, alongside that of Swinton, particularly with a focus on residential-led schemes in both those locations, is another big opportunity to show that commitment to town centre development, but particularly the appetite and need driven by our population growth for a greater level of residential, affordable and increasingly social rent housing, and watch that space for more in relation to our activity in relation to social rent development over coming years. So I'll finish just with the Salford Way. This is not a dilapidated bypass that needs resurfacing. This is the name of our inclusive growth strategy in Salford. It's the way we roll, it's the way that we do things. This is our blueprint for trying to take an increasingly diverse, younger, buoyant and growing community with us on that journey as one of the highest growth areas of Greater Manchester, but with a phenomenal opportunity really to try and build those connections between what built environment growth, residential growth, expansion of commercial floor space, expansion of residential, but particularly those skills opportunities for young people and lifelong learners alike that have to be part of how we deliver inclusive growth in practice. I'll finish there and look forward to hearing from John. Thanks very much.
You want to introduce me? Okay.
Thank you, Tom. So we've heard about the Salford Way, and I'm delighted now to invite John Walsh, Chief Executive of Belfast City Council, to talk about the Belfast Way.
Thank you very much. I'm John Walsh, Chief Executive of Belfast City Council. I've held that role for about a year now. I was previously the council's lawyer for 32 years. I come from Belfast, born, bred, very proud of the city, very proud of where it is now and how it's come through its more difficult times. But for all the reasons that you know of, it is a city where inclusion and inclusivity is so much more important. But it is a city that is transitioning, and it's a city that has transitioned to a greater extent. There are much higher numbers of people who live in the city now who've chosen to make Belfast their home, who are not originally from Belfast. There are many people who have come there to work from the rest of the UK. It is an attractive city. It's a city where we want to not only retain the talent we have, but to attract the talent in. And when I took this job, I took it on the mantra of inclusive growth and quality placemaking. So today we have a population of about 350,000, over 1 million in terms of the broader metropolitan area. We have the 15th largest city in the UK and 11th largest conurbation in the UK as well. We have 49.6% of our higher education students studied a broad STEM-related subject, and as you'll hear from me, people are our strength. They are very much in demand. Our growth in terms of cyber and fintech has been driven by the quality of the people and the quality of our universities and third-level colleges. And so how do you deliver inclusivity? How do you look at it and take a very holistic approach? Well, here we've brought a number of things together. The top left is the Belfast Agenda. This is our first community plan. And whilst the document itself was produced by Belfast City Council, it is the product of our people, very widely consulted upon, a lot of engagement with the voluntary and community sector in terms of what it is that we produced, and a very ambitious document that actually shows a deep affection for the city from all quarters, but also aspirations for its future in terms of that inclusivity, fairness and compassion. So we have an ambition to grow our population by 66,000 people by 2035. We have the local development plan, which is the spatial outworking of our community plan. And we have looked at our, obviously, climate issues, resilience. We've baked all of this in. And we also have the magic dust of Belfast, which is culture. And you young people have to come there and sample it because it's a really good place to have a night out. So with all of these things, when you bring them together, that's really an expression of the ambition for the city in terms of inclusivity and making sure that everything is considered in a holistic way. And sort of like Tom, we have our own game changers. The city is a city that is transformed. Any of you had been there a number of years ago will, if you go and visit today, it will look different. You will see the cranes, you will see the development taking place. So we need to focus, obviously, in terms of investing in our infrastructure and transport. We need to make sure that we do that in a way that makes sure that segregated communities from the city centre don't feel so segregated, which is a challenge. We need to imagine the public realm and our connected and green spaces. We need to do much more of that. Obviously, in a post-COVID world, people have come to expect more, and we should deliver more. And if I just also pick out the one, I think it's quite similar to Tom. City centre living is a massive thing for the city in terms of its future growth. And we have issues in the city centre in the sense of that investment in our city centre was never made because of the significant conflict that took place there. Obviously, it was not a place that you would want to live. So that investment in the city centre and growing the population is key to the creation of what I call that city centre, that place where you can live, work and play. That's very important to the sustainability of our city centre for the future as well. So we will be working on all of these things and bringing them forward. In city regeneration, we have some really, really brilliant city deal projects that are funded, which will hopefully captivate people and keep them in the city for much longer. The Belfast Region City deal was a real game changer for us, £1 billion of investment, and what we did was we used that to focus in the areas where we had existing strengths. So the deal focuses on the high growth sectors. We have a really, really strong reputation in health and life sciences. We have a strong reputation in innovation and digital technologies, and you'll know our existing reputation in terms of cyber and particularly fintech, and those are the areas in respect of which there's a demand for growth. And we also obviously want to make sure that we do those tourism projects that I've just referred to, like Belfast Stories, which we're hoping will open in 2028, which will give you something else to look at rather than just come to see Titanic. And obviously we need to look at this in the context of connecting people through all of those prisms to the opportunities. So we make sure that we work with the education authorities, the universities, to ensure that the skills pipeline is there to match the opportunities that are coming forward. We're also looking at, I mean, all cities are saying this, but I think Belfast can put itself up there and say that we have been very successful. So we're obviously developing an innovation district where we can create clusters of those businesses with the academics in order to maximise the opportunities. And let's not forget, Belfast finds itself in a position whereby with the Windsor framework, it will have dual market access. We're also developing a smart district, which is obviously looking at more citizen-centric focused in terms of how technology can deliver for our people and make their lives better. And also the development of a smart port, much like Eindhoven has. And then we have about £5 billion worth of potential development going forward at various stages in terms of its progress at the moment. So we have Tribeca, which is one of the city centre sites, Waterside, Weaver's Cross, which is part of the transport hub, which is obviously huge, and we'll be doing a lot of innovation work around that as it develops. The Titanic Quarter. Ulster University actually moved its campus into the city centre, and it has brought a new lease of life to the city centre with all those students, and quite a lot of student-related development taking place as well. And when you take all of this together and you sort of look at the social, the economic, and the environmental impacts, and you weave all of that through and you bake it in, then you get to a city that is properly inclusive. Not necessarily inclusive in terms of all the ways in which you suggested, but there are other obligations that are imposed on us at law, and in any event for which my council lives up to in terms of values, and all of that is properly considered. So I think I can leave it there and we'll get into the debate shortly, but thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And our final speaker for this afternoon's this session, I'm delighted to invite Jackie Rigby, Head of Affordable Housing Strategy and Place from Homes England. Thank you, Jackie.
Hi, everybody. So Homes England, it's a national agency with the ability to deliver locally and help to deliver local priorities. It's fair to say that over the last 5 years or so, we've been an agency that's mainly been focused on increasing housing supply. But with the launch of the government's Levelling Up White Paper, it firmly puts kind of placemaking and our rolling regeneration back on the agenda. The Levelling Up White Paper also makes it really, really clear that there's a need to empower local leaders to deliver what their places need. And Homes England have got a really big role in that, in making sure that we can support local leaders to achieve their vision and strategy. Homes England are changing the way that we deliver, moving towards much more of a place-based focus. So through this work, through working with local leaders, we have the ability to be able to identify what that vision is, what that strategy is, how we can best support with the tools that we've got available, whether that's through the skills and expertise that we've got, whether we provide capacity and capability to support local authorities and combined authorities and what they want to do, or whether it's through some of our investment streams. So for us, it's much more about kind of what can we offer but also we have a really clear role in brokering partnerships as well. So it's not just limited to what Homes England have got. Actually, what can we do to work with local leaders to identify what the issues are, what the solutions are that may be beyond our remit. So we're very, very interested in kind of partnerships that we can establish and we can be part of, but also how can we help to facilitate some of those private and public sector partnerships as well, really to get to the heart of what local places need. We know that there is not a one-size-fits-all. This is very much about bespoke solutions, so really supporting local leaders with what they want to do. They know their areas best, far better than a national agency, but it is about how we use our skills and expertise to be able to support people. So what does that look like in terms of the partnerships that we've got? We've got a strategic place partnership with the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, making it really clear about the roles and responsibilities of both what Homes England and our partners, so the Combined Authority and its constituent local authorities, what we want to achieve and how we can collectively do that and monitor the progress. Tom very, very briefly touched on things like ECF as well, the English Cities Fund. That's a public-private sector partnership that we've been able to set up where, again, we can make sure that between us and our private sector partners, we've got money we can readily invest, but again, speaking to those local opportunities, those local needs, making sure that the leaders have got a say in actually what it is that we need to deliver. So for Homes England, we're here. We want to work in partnership with our places. We want inclusive cities that kind of stand the test of time, that are sustainable, and we're all in it for the long haul, but we're here very much to respond to local need. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm going to invite our speakers to back to the stage for some questions. Go for it. If I'll take this one. So we should have a roving microphone that will come around in a moment, but I'm going to start off by a kick-off question for the panel. So if we don't respect diversity and inclusion, as we said, we'll have less productivity, more sick people, less happy communities and weaker economic growth. Yet this often feels like a secondary matter, or indeed often a nice to have. How do we raise the profile of inclusion within communities as part of economic growth to get the impact that we need?
It's a brilliant question, Janie. I think there's a number of ways we can do that. I would say the public sector at large, swimming with the tide of the appetite for ESG across a lot of our private sector partners, is one really important way we can do that. We know that that is built into lots of companies' corporate and investor expectations these days, and I think the public sector can actually learn a lot from that ESG agenda in the private sector. I think we've also got to be quite imaginative, those public sector commissioners, particularly in the built environment worlds, as to how we lead and set expectations on that agenda. I think that's partly about our own social value expectations as contractors and commissioners in local authorities, but I think government has to step up to that as well. And my plea for this would be thinking beyond the Green Book from the Treasury and building ESG in, long-term ESG on all of the kind of metrics that you've talked about. Every protected characteristic in the Equalities Act and more has to be part of a very vociferous and proactive, publicly backed investment strategy, and I think government should go toe-to-toe with us on that and think beyond the Green Book.
Fantastic. I guess it's a case then of lead, learn and advocate. So, John, have you...
Yeah, I think public bodies, organisations like ourselves really need to, we need to live the values we espouse. So therefore, all the things that Tom's just referred to in terms of making sure that you've got ESG baked in, at a policy level is fundamentally important. Obviously, engaging with those communities is very important. I mean, that we have so much buy-in in terms of where we land in terms of our policy positions because we actually actively engage with the communities. So it's not just it doesn't just feel like it's Belfast City Council's policy as such in terms of those relevant policy areas. It feels very much as though it is a city policy agreed by all the key stakeholders, but particularly with engagement with the community.
you. And Jackie, from a Homes England point of view, how do you think, as an organisation, you can raise the profile to get better impact?
Yeah, so for us, we're very clear it's about quality as well as quantity, particularly when it comes to housing and when it comes to placemaking. I think, like I said before, just kind of making sure that we're really responsive to what places need, really important for us. And kind of through our emerging strategic plan, lots and lots of focus around sustainability, decency, quality standards, and they'll be the measures that we invest our resource against.
So I'm going to ask if there are any questions or observations from the audience. We got the microphone for the front here, thank you. If you want to say your name and where you're from as well with your answer.
Hi, hello. My name's David. I'm with the Regeneration Brainery. And it's a question about Media City. I know you mentioned that you are looking to promote development in gaming and AI. What are you looking to do to help promote it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, essentially, we're looking to invest in bringing more companies into that area who are part of not just the gaming development world, but the supply chain that sits behind those companies. So we've got a presence from a number of those already, but not nearly as prominently as we would like. And I think, in a sense, digital and gaming and the use of AI in that whole sector, whilst it's a huge high-value thing in its own right, it's got cross-sectoral application across the wider economy. You've only got to look at the number of changes in all of our consumer habits that have happened during COVID, the number of us who've bought and spec'd cars using AI without actually going out to test drive them, the number of property transactions that have happened without people necessarily visiting the flat or the house or the commercial property. AI has got a colossal cross-sectoral application, and we think that gaming can be part of leading the charge for that, not just for that sector on its own, but for many other sectors as well. So, yeah, come and be part of it.
Thank you.
Fantastic question, thank you. A question at the back. And just as it moves around, say, really delighted we've got two people with Regeneration Brainery, young people here today. So thank you ever so much for asking that first question.
Sorry, this is more of an answer than a question. I'm here representing Media City, so I'm happy to have a chat with you afterwards. But the gaming industry is obviously a sector where that's seeing massive growth. I think it was the biggest letting in Liverpool last year was the Fire Sprite letting. There's EA requirement that's going around the market that we're really actively pursuing. It's obviously like way up there on our target list. And like Tom was saying, we Media City, because it's so into kind of media and tech and wanting to be at the cutting edge, even things like the next phase in the development, so phase 2 of Media City, our next big sort of office development, we're working with a company at the moment to do, it's almost like a video game walkthrough of the building. So if you can imagine like Grand Theft Auto, but without all the crooks and the drugs and all stuff like that. And you can walk around and see the building. It's really interesting. And again, we don't want to just do it on the flat screen. So we're investing in a kind of immersive technology, kind of curved screen to really be at the cutting edge. So, and hopefully that leads to kind of inroads with attracting gaming companies to Media City. But it's definitely really important to us. So, sorry, not a question, more of an answer. But
Sounds like you got a job.
Yeah.
You did.
That's fantastic, thank you. And I think there's a conversation to be had afterwards. That's brilliant. Okay, any other questions or indeed comments? Okay, so while you have a think about some, I'll go back to some of that I've got. So I mentioned in my opening that engagement's really important, but we always have to be aware of the limitations of that. And so some of the work that we did with the United Nations was the idea of allyship. So being more mindful of other groups and advocating for them in design processes. Is this something any of you particularly actively experienced, or is there a way that you can see we can bring this into some of the regeneration development projects in our cities?
I think there's always an inherent danger in advocating for, because, is your understanding of the issues or the lens through which that generation or that person sees something the same? That's why I, always have believed fundamentally in the rules around engagement with the communities, with different communities of user, etc., etc. you need to understand all of those perspectives because they all need to go into the thought process.
Interesting, thank you. Jackie?
Yeah, so as a government agency, we undertake community engagement for some of our developments that we want to do, but I think alongside that, kind of a large proportion of the funding that we receive is on affordable housing. So we have a really close working relationship with the housing associations who effectively are stewardships of place. They know their communities, they know the needs of the people that they're serving. So I think it's important to think it's not just about what we directly do, but things that we indirectly do as well through our partners.
Yeah, I mean, we are, it's bread and butter to us in lots of ways, Jane, but I think there's always a really important role for taking that to the next level and continuing to challenge yourselves as stewards of the public environment, the public realm, the built environment in your places. Councils are traditionally very good at community engagement, I think, and very good at telling people how good they are at it and producing impact assessments and so on and so forth. Whether that is sufficiently sensitive to zeitgeist issues of today, such as the safety of women on the public transport across Greater Manchester, for example, is a big issue that's come through our Women and Girls Commission in Salford recently. Whether or not our public housing offer is sufficiently agile and adaptable to the growing needs of a growing Somali community in Pendleton and elsewhere in the city. I mean, I could go on with other examples. I think the point is you have to constantly evolve, adapt, and broaden and deepen your engagement processes around particular schemes, around place shaping in general, to make sure you're constantly challenging yourself. And particularly if you're in areas like John's, like my own, where you're dealing with exponential population growth, which typically comes with massively increasing population diversification, you need to keep asking yourself those questions. You can't stand still on it, I would say.
I think it's really interesting you say that changing dynamic of community, not taking for granted the groups you engaged with before are representative, particularly where you've got that level of change, as you say, Tom.
Absolutely, and I think just as an add-on to that, it redoubles the inclusive growth challenge, because in a sense, the longer you stand still on that agenda, the more you won't take your communities with you. So I think the more you do that adaptable approach to community engagement, the easier it is to understand all of those different angles on exactly the agenda we're talking about this afternoon.
Thank you. I'm just going to go back to a point that you made in response to an earlier question, Tom, where you were talking about influencing government. And Jackie, thinking from your role with Homes England, if there are particular innovative strategic partnership models that government can use to accelerate delivery around the inclusion agenda.
So I think before I talked about the strategic place partnership that we have with the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, for us, like I said, it's really clear about the roles and responsibilities of the partners involved, but being able to have that long-term delivery plan, being really clear about what we want to achieve, being able to monitor that, build a pipeline and then blend the funding that's available means that we can respond to those opportunities and respond again to what the local places need.
Yeah, and I think in a sense, partnerships like the ECF partnership and like our emerging strand of the Homes England strategic partnership with GM in the city of Salford are great examples of that. You know, we're fond of talking to our investor audiences about different ESG agendas, about patient capital and different models of investment, but really what's important, I think, is the ability with partners to take that very long-term view on some of those projects. And that, I think, is all the more important in areas of significant socioeconomic and demographic churn and challenge. You can't fix those issues with a project-by-project, scheme-by-scheme, red line by red line approach to regeneration. You have to take a 20 to 30-year view, which I think is exactly what the, at which point the roof lifts off, is exactly what the Belfast way, the Salford way are all about, really, is trying to take communities with you over that longer term. I just think, you know, there is a challenge about trying our best to encourage not just, I think, convince partners like Homes England, but the big bits of the government machine to come with us on that journey. Their forecasting models, their appraisal models have to be adapted to be able to take that longer term view, which is exactly what inclusive economic regeneration requires as well. You can't just appraise that over the short term, as we all know.
Thank you, Tom. And from Belfast's experience, has there been particular partnership models that have been successful in taking forward the inclusive communities agenda?
So with the Belfast Agenda, which was our first community plan, we developed a network of different community-based partnerships, and those look at, we adopted a very outcomes-based accountability type approach to the issues in the city, and then we built governance models which incorporated community input at a range of different issues, and that's the process by which we then will, formulate our policies in relation to those difficult areas. So yeah, it's actually plumbed into the system.
Thank you. I'm going to check if there are any other questions. We've got a very quiet audience this afternoon. Do you all have big lunches and gone to sleep?
I think the bar must be open.
Well, I'm mindful that we've talked a lot about public sector, and there are a lot of private sector partners who are in the room. I'm just wondering what you see as the role of the private sector and the private businesses in leading the inclusive communities agenda. You talked a bit about ESG and that being coming from the private sector and something to perhaps learn from. So maybe some further reflections on that, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I think the private sector has, in many ways, got ahead of the public sector over the last 10 years or so in building that, insistence on appraising those factors into investment strategies, and I've embraced that, as I said earlier. But I think we also need an ongoing appreciation and dialogue, really, about seeing the private sector as being stakeholders in place, and certainly that's the way I approach my role and a lot of the strategic relationships we have in and around Greater Manchester. Investors typically they've been in GM for many, many years, or more often than not, they are part of GM's growth story. They have more than just an interest in the performance of this particular building that's coming out of the ground this week. They're there for the long run. And I think if the public sector increasingly understands inclusive economic growth on the basis of joint stakeholder expectations and a joint agenda about wanting to see the ongoing success of the place, its labour market, its communities, its educational performance, its ongoing retraining needs, which are as much a need for all of those professions in the built environment as we know as they are for us looking at school leavers. I think we get a better traction in that relationship. And ultimately, I don't often see, 9 times out of 10, I don't see a huge distance between local authorities' ESG goals, if you like, and those of the private sector. There's a lot of congruence there, and I think we should be actively talking about that and embracing it.
Fantastic. So I'm going to ask a concluding comment from each of you, if I may, which is following on that point. If you had an ask of the private sector around inclusive communities, what that might be. I'm going to come to you first, John.
We've put in place, obviously corporate social responsibility is very fundamentally important to us, and we've been engaging with the corporates, I have to say, they've been really willing. So, my ask for them is to see and understand the city, understand its needs, feel a part of the city, and do what it can to reach into those communities to make a real difference, because I believe that they can and do in many cases.
Thank you. Jackie?
Yeah, so for me it's the same ask of all our partners. Come and talk to us, tell us what it is that you're interested in. Like Tom said, we've got lots of good examples of where the private sector is playing a really key part in Manchester and what it's achieving. We can share that learning with other places, with other cities as well. And yet there's lots we can do in that space. So I think, the public sector can't do it all, so we really welcome where we can bring the private sector in to be able to deliver some of those innovative solutions.
Thank you. And final comment, Tom?
Definitely. I think let's work together to continue to see our cities and our areas through the lens of place. I think that's where our goals overlap and collide. And ultimately, I like the shorthand that if you get this stuff right, you make places happier. There's loads of statistical byproducts of that on health and economic participation, but let's make places happier and do that in partnership. And if I could go to 2 things, Jane, I'd say to the private sector to help us to get the Treasury to redesign the Green Book as well, but we'll leave that on for another day.
I think that's a good call to arms. Sort out the Treasury and make people happier. I think those 2 things often go hand in hand. So I would like to say thank you to our panellists. I'm also going to say thank you to Sarah at the front from Salford City Council, who helped coordinate and bring this session together. So if we could all thank the speakers and Sarah. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Searching and searching for someone to save my soul.